My name is Bruno Bianchi Sarcone. I run Spainguru.es, and this is the free Spanish non-lucrative visa webinar. I have organized this webinar into a timeline, so we have 3 chapters: before the application, during the application, and after the approval. First, we're going to talk about definitions, how consulates and BLS offices work, different immigration status, some tax considerations, and then we're going to go fully into eligibility, requirements, and documentation. Then we're going to talk about the timing for the application process, and after the approval, how it's best to arrive to Spain, a few key steps and recommendations once you do, and if you plan to stay in Spain for the long term, then we're going to talk also about that. Remember that the content of this webinar is for information purposes only and is not legal advice. The requirements listed here are not official, so please check your specific consulate requirements and also the BLS office requirements in the case in which they are appointed to process the NLV procedure at your consulate. A little bit about Spainguru. Our objective is facilitating the relocation process for English-speaking foreigners to Spain since 2014. You can find some good reviews out there, so you are in very good hands. If you happen to use any of our partners, make sure you can be absolutely sure that you are in good hands. And you can use Spainguru for absolutely free. You can join our newsletter every Monday. You can opt out anytime, where we feature the top discussions in our groups and most watched video and most watched blog post. You have our YouTube channel, absolutely free, more than 900 videos, blog posts, and as we said, a huge community with more than 150,000 members in several groups. And if you haven't joined yet, please join the Spanish NLV non-lucrative visa group with more than 20,000 members. As I mentioned before, I have vetted personally all my partners. Most of them I have been recommending for more than 3 years, and they stood the test of time. If you need immigration experts to help you with the application process, you can find it on Spainguru.es, tax advisors, financial planners, and in case of you decide doing yourself the application, you will still need compliant health insurance, medical certificates, sworn translation, apostle services. All those you can find it on Spainguru.es, and many more services, more than 100 services. If you're planning to move to Spain or are already living in Spain, you can find discounts and referral codes on Spainguru.es. So take your time to go to the website and check the menu, because you're going to find interesting things for sure. Now let's go with the timeline, and we start before the application. What's the Spanish non-lucrative visa? It's a Spanish visa for non-EU citizens who can financially support themselves and who don't need to work in Spain. It is defined by the main organic law 4/2000 and the regulation of this law that it recently changed. The new regulation of the law took effect on May 20th, 2025. Now, you cannot apply for the Spanish non-lucrative visa from wherever in the world. You need to apply from the consulate that serves the area where you are a legal resident. For this, I have created dedicated pages for each of the consulates in these 4 countries: USA, UK, Canada, and Australia. You can find them on Spainguru.es/Spain non-lucrative visa. You will need to prove that you are a legal resident within the area that serves those that your consulate serves. Okay. What is the interesting thing about the dedicated pages on Spainguru for each of the consulates? And here you can find, for example, if you're applying a New York Spain non-lucrative visa, you select your consulate, you find your consulate, and once you are in your consulate, you're going to find a lot of first-hand experiences from community members who applied for the non-lucrative visa at your specific consulate. And believe me, they're so different. The consulates are so different that I highly recommend you staying on top of the details of your specific consulates. That's why reading first-hand experiences is really important, and you can find them on Spainguru.es at your dedicated page for your consulate. Now, many consulates use a third party called BLS. This is an Indian company. It's a huge company that operates in more than 60 countries, and they do the processes for different visas for many countries, and one of them is Spain. Now, in the UK, all the consulates use this third party to process the non-lucrative visa, so you will have to deal with them directly. In the USA, not all the consulates use BLS. Miami does, Los Angeles, San Francisco do. Houston recently started too, but for example, New York doesn't. So make sure you understand whether the non-lucrative visa is handled by this third-party company. Now, if you are a national of the USA or the UK, Canada, Australia, you probably know that you can enter Spain and the whole Schengen area You have a limit of 90 days on a 180 days rolling period. So you can't be over that period of time. If you want to stay longer in Spain, you will have to obtain a specific visa. Okay. Now, some nationalities require a visa even to enter Schengen as tourists. For example, the Philippines. Okay. What is the Schengen area? It is a group of 28 European countries, which is internally borderless. Okay. Now, if you are a non-EU national and you plan to stay in Spain and generally in any other Schengen country, specifically in Spain, you will need to obtain a visa that will allow you or grant you the right to obtain a residency. Okay. Now, the non-lucrative visa, it's a temporary visa or residency. In Spain, residencies that usually are up to 5 years are called temporary residencies. And residency over 5 years are called long-term residency. Okay. Now, the non-lucrative visa, when you apply for it, you get it for 1 year, then you renew for 2 more, and then for 2 more, total 5. That is a temporary residency. So the non-lucrative visa is the paper that goes ticked on your passport that is valid for 90 days only. After that, it expires. And once you enter Spain during the non-lucrative visa validity period of 90 days, you need to obtain your residency card. So you are a resident of Spain under a non-lucrative residency. Okay. Citizens from European countries and associate countries like Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, as well as their spouses, don't need to obtain a non-lucrative visa to stay in Spain for more than 90 days. So if you have the possibility to obtain a European passport, or you are married to a European passport holder, or you are a European passport holder, definitely the non-lucrative visa is not for you. In these cases, if you want to stay more than 90 days, you don't need to fulfill so many financial requirements. You have a work permit rights. The residence permit will be valid for 5 years without renewals, renewals every 2 years. So if you're a European passport holder, or you are married to one, or you have the possibility to obtain a European passport, maybe that's the way to go, for sure. It's going to be easier for you, faster and cheaper. You're going to get more rights, like working rights. Now, let's talk about taxes. A few considerations about taxes that you need to have in mind before even making the decision to move to Spain. And the most important concept is tax residency. What happens when you become a tax resident in Spain, and when does it happen? So, when you become a tax resident in Spain, you will be liable for taxes on your worldwide income and potentially on the net value of your assets, and paying taxes to the Spanish tax authorities. There are 3 conditions to become a Spanish tax resident. If you spend over 183 days in Spain within a calendar year from January 1st to December 31st. Those days don't need to be consecutive, and they are regardless of your immigration status. That means that if you come to Spain as a tourist, those days will count as well. Now, there are 2 other conditions. If your main economic activity or primary income source is in Spain, you could be deemed to be a tax resident in Spain, even if you spend less than 183 days on a calendar year. Or if your spouse and children are permanent residents or residents in Spain, it could be considered that your center of interest is in Spain. Okay, and potentially the Spanish tax authorities may consider you a tax resident in Spain. A few taxes to have in mind. First of all, is the income tax that we pay with the deadline on June 30th. We pay in 2025, we will pay the income that happened in 2024 with progressive rates that range from 19% to 47%. They range by region, okay? And make no mistake, you have there on the right the tax table for progressive rates. You pay, let's say, an average or a median on those brackets, okay? If you want to know more, you can attend my Spanish tax webinar that I hold every 15 days, and it's absolutely free, okay? Now, there's also a Form 720, which is a form where you declare your foreign assets like properties, rights held abroad, and the deadline is on March 31st. Then there is the famous wealth tax, that is a regional tax. And then there is the solidarity tax, that is a nationwide wealth tax, okay? So the wealth tax, the regional wealth tax, it depends where you live and the thresholds in which that wealth tax kicks in. Remember that Madrid and Andalusia are the most favorable ones. There's basically no wealth tax. Recently, Valencia raised the threshold to 1 million. It used to be 500,000. So have those regions in mind. Now, the solidarity tax kicks in at 3 million plus assets, but it happens in all the Spanish territory. Remember that Spain has double taxation agreements with both USA, UK, Canada, Australia, all those countries, to avoid being taxed twice on the same thing. But of course, maybe the taxes in Spain are higher than the same taxes, the same category of taxes in your origin countries, like, for example, capital gains tax, that we're going to talk about that, okay? As I said, you can join my webinar for taxes every 15 days. Now, let's go back to non-lucrative visa, and we're going to talk about the documentation. This is a summary list. Always make sure to check the official requirements. They will ask you, first, where you're going to go in Spain. Most of the consulates don't have a strict consideration of this question, and just by answering which province you plan to move to is going to be enough. But some consulates are quite strict, and they will actually demand that you provide a rental contract or property deed, okay, even. So those consulates are famous. These are consulates like Boston, Chicago, for example. But I have an interview to Ainhoa Manero, which is an expert immigration lawyer that I highly recommend on Spainguru.es, where she says that when she applies in these consulates, she never provides rental contracts because it's absolutely outrageous that these consulates ask for this as a requirement, because it is not written anywhere, okay? If you want to watch that video, if you happen to go to any of those consulates, send me an email to hello@spainguru.es, and I will be happy to send you the link for that video, okay? Or consult with professionals. Then they will ask you for address in the country of residence. As I said, you will need to prove that you're a legal resident within the area that the consulate serves. Then you will need to prove sufficient financial means to support yourself, and if you bring dependents, course, you need to also support those dependents without working, okay, without active income. You will have to show a comprehensive health insurance from a company authorized to operate in Spain, or eventually, if you are a UK retiree, you can show the S1 form instead that will grant you access to the Spanish public healthcare system. You will have to show a clean criminal background check, a medical certificate, and if you plan to go with your spouse and or children, only on those cases, you will have to show new marriage certificates, new birth certificates for all the dependents, and in most consulates, they are asking to show proof that you will not engage in any work or professional activities in Spain via a letter of intent, okay? And of course, depending on the consulate, they will ask you for photos. You will always have to pay the fees. Every applicant needs to pay the fees, fill certain forms, etc., etc. If you want to watch a video, 2 videos, in fact, 20 minutes each, where I ask the top 55 frequently asked questions to Ainhoa Manero from Stern Abogados, you can go to Spainguru's YouTube channel. It's amazing. It's an amazing source of information. 55 questions, top frequently asked questions for the NLV. Now let's talk about the financial requirements of 2025. You need to prove sufficient funds, how much money you need to show, and it could be savings and or regular passive income. Well, the main applicant has to show 400% of the IPREM index, which has been the same in 2023, 2024, and in 2025. And each dependent needs to show 100% of the IPREM index as well. Spouses count as dependents. That translated into money is 28,800 euros for the main applicant and 7,200 euros for each dependent. You can see on the right, there's a table. For example, a couple, there will be a main applicant for 28,800 euros plus 7,200 euros of the spouse. That's a total of 36,000 euros minimum financial threshold for this visa. The financial proof can be savings and or a combination with passive income or fully passive income. For example, pension withdrawals. Rental income can be used too, but there's more and more consulates that are not accepting rental income as they consider this type of income not very safe, as the tenants can stop paying you. Can be dividends and other passive income sources. For this, you will need to show bank statements, okay, and certificates and documentation from your bank where you have the money or where you are receiving the passive income. Some consulates will also ask for tax returns, okay? Now, something to have in mind is that in most regions in Spain, you will need to prove double the funding requirements when you renew. And it is double the funding requirements in a space, or let's say in a time of 2 years, okay? Therefore, if you make, for example, 30,000 euros per year on your pension, you already will have 60,000 euros in 2 years. So passive income counts as twice, whereas savings don't count twice. So you will have to have double the amount in savings, okay? We're going to look at a special case, so you can see how we calculate that. We mentioned the IPREM index. This is an index that is decided every year in the national budget. There has to be political agreement in the Congress for the budget to be renewed. Since the last years there was no agreement, they automatically use the same previous agreed budget. Therefore, the IPREM hasn't changed in 2023 and 2024. It's 600 euros per month or 7,200 euros per year, which is 100% of the IPREM, which is what a dependent needs to show. But you need to be careful because the IPREM can change. Every year there could be new budgets. Every year there's higher chance that the new budget is agreed, and therefore they will take the opportunity to update the IPREM. So if it goes to 650 per month, then from 28.8K for the main applicant, it will go to 31.2K per applicant, okay? And if you already obtained your non-lucrative visa and now you're renewing and there is a new IPREM, you will have to renew with the new financial requirements. So it's something you need to budget accordingly. There has been a lot of paranoia and craziness about the new documentation that many consulates decided to start asking for the funding requirements. These are just a bunch of certificates from your bank. And I have just published a video where I interview Ainhoa Manero from Sterna Abogados. If you want to watch that video, it's on Spainguru's YouTube channel. There's the QR code where we address every single thing that many consulates have published, like balances from the previous year, like average balance per month on the previous year and stuff like that. But you will see that Ainhoa's answers are very, very interesting. And she's a top immigration lawyer with huge experience in NLV. So really, I think it is a must watch this video. I highly recommend you watching it because there's a lot of paranoia and worry about this, and it shouldn't be that way. Now, $1 million question. Can I work remotely for non-Spanish companies? And again, I will quote Ainhoa. Yes, actually, under the non-lucrative visa, once you have obtained it and you're under the non-lucrative residence in Spain, there's actually a gray area. There's a Supreme Court ruling that permits working under the non-lucrative residence. Of course, when you apply for it, you cannot use any active income or create the slightest doubt that you plan to work or that you have a work. You will be denied ipso facto at any consulate. I'm not talking about that, and I'm not recommending you to do it. I'm just telling you that once you have the non-lucrative residence, it's a gray area. It is not in the law. Nothing in the law forbids you to work remotely for a non-Spanish company. It is forbidden for you to work for a Spanish company, but not remotely for a non-Spanish company, okay? So if you want to know more, also, I have a video about this, so you can hear the answers from an experienced lawyer. And there's so many people working remotely for non-Spanish companies under the non-lucrative visa. They pay their taxes on that income. They pay their private health insurance. They don't pay Social Security in Spain. And when they renew the non-lucrative residence, they never use their active income. They use their savings, passive income, etc., and they fulfill the requirements. But still, they have on the side a remote job. So this is the situation today. It is not. It is a gray area. Now there is a digital nomad visa that it is more suitable for remote work. So I highly recommend you looking at that type of visa if you are in that situation. And of course, never, ever even mention the possibility or plans to work at a consulate submission, even if you're entitled to work after having a sabbatical year on the non-lucrative visa in Spain, and you say like, well, I plan to go back to work after that, after spending 1 year, you will be denied, okay? I recently saw a case like this, and it is very clear that consulates don't even want to hear about the possibility of that. But, and making, of course, here, a clear case of how consulates are different. Edinburgh permits to work on a non-remote basis for offshore work outside of Spain. This is the case of someone who is working at the oil rig at the Northern Sea in Scotland, who has been granted the non-lucrative visa. It is an official, actually it's in the official website that you can be doing this type of works. And asking lawyers about this, lawyers mention that they have customers that they have specific jobs, like for example, pilots, airplane pilots, that they work once every month. For example, they fly to the USA, they work for 10 days, and then they go back under the non-lucrative visa. If you are in these circumstances, definitely go with the professional help that understand how this works, because basically, these people are obtaining a non-lucrative visa with these types of works, but not all kinds of work will be accepted. So be careful with that. Now, let's go with private health insurance requirements. As we mentioned, unless you are a UK retiree, you will need to provide a private health insurance that fulfills certain conditions. First of all, no co-payments. In many consulates, no reimbursement clauses, no waiting periods. You need to be covered from the moment zero in which you step in Spain. You will need to also have full coverage. And I add an asterisk here. We're going to talk about that. And in most cases, usually unless you have a Spanish bank account where you can pay monthly, you will have to pay a full year in advance. This is what most companies require in order to issue the certificate of coverage in Spanish, which is a document required for the Spanish non-lucrative visa application. This document has to have a very specific wording. Okay, so you have to be careful. It's recommended to work with Spanish companies because they know what document to provide. Let's go to the frequently asked questions. Are my medicines covered? If you're under private health insurance, you will have to pay retail price for your medicines. The news is it is much cheaper than in the US and usually than the UK. What should be the health insurance start date? Many people say you need to have started your health insurance at the time of the appointment. Some people say that later. So I would take that in most cases, if you plan to, let's say, enter Spain on the October 10th, if you start your health insurance on October 1st, then you will be fine, okay? This is how most of people do it. They guesstimate a date in the future in which they will be covered, because you need to be covered when you enter Spain, not when you apply. When you enter Spain, you need to be covered, right? And there could be a difference between when you submit your paperwork and after the processing of your visa and when you enter Spain. There could be a few months that you are using your health insurance, that you're paying for it. And sometimes even consulates, they make you problems because you started it too early. Therefore, you have less coverage than 1 year when you get your visa validity. So this is it. What if I have, next one is, are there health insurances for older than 75 years of age? Yes, I heard that DKV and Adeslas. I work with and recommend an exclusive Adeslas agent that can provide compliant health insurance for up to 84 years of age. What if I have pre-existing conditions? And here I'm circling back to the full coverage condition that I mentioned before. So here are the nuances. Depending on how serious your pre-existing conditions are, first of all, if you have had cancer diagnosis in the last 5 years, you're probably not going to get coverage, unfortunately. That's a serious condition. If you have a non-serious condition like high blood pressure, these kind of things, what can happen is that private health insurance, they will cover you for everything else, but they will exclude those pre-existing conditions, but still will be able to provide a certificate of coverage in Spanish that you need to apply for the non-lucrative visa. However, once you get in Spain, if you have any problem related to those pre-existing conditions, they will not cover them and you will have to pay everything out of pocket, everything that is related to those pre-existing conditions, right? Now, what can you do? Next question. Can I pay into the public system in Spain? Yes, you can, but only after 1 year of legal residence in Spain. You can use something called Convenio Especial, which varies depending on each region, but you will pay about 60 euros per month if you're younger than 65, and 157 euros per month if you're older than 65. This will grant you access to the public healthcare system in Spain with some limitations. For example, medicines price will not be subsidized. You will need to pay retail price, even with this scheme. And also something you need to have in mind is that it takes time to have real access to the public healthcare system. It takes a few weeks, even sometimes months after you apply for it. Therefore, when you do your first renewal after 1 year of non-lucrative visa, usually you will still have to have a private health insurance. So you will overlap public system if you apply for it and the second year of your private health insurance, and make sure not to have any gaps. Can I use my current health insurance from the UK and USA? Short answer is, if it's NLV compliant, yes, why not? But my long answer is, I highly don't recommend it because it brings a lot of friction into your process. The certificate of coverage will not be in Spanish. You will have to swan translate it. It could have problems in the wording. Usually they have reimbursement clauses. It could be considered to be a travel health insurance by officers reviewing your paperwork. There's so many things that can happen. So I highly not recommend it. And the private health insurances in Spain tend to be much more affordable. So that's my long answer. Can I apply with a UK S1 form if I am a UK retiree? Yes, definitely. You can avoid applying with a private health insurance and you can use the S1 form. Do I need a Spanish bank account? No, you don't need it. But if you happen to have one, maybe the private health insurance will allow you to pay on a monthly basis instead of paying all the first year in advance. Can there be reimbursements? This is a gray area. Some consulates write it. For example, Houston, no reimbursements, it's a denial. Some consulates, they don't write it on their websites, but there are denials if they see reimbursements. Okay. Some other consulates don't care. Okay. So if you like risk, as I say, if you like Mambo, get a private health insurance with reimbursements, because there's a high risk of being denied. But maybe sometimes you find a good health insurance that you like with maybe a little reimbursement clause, and it will be accepted. So that is the situation with that. Will I get a refund if I'm denied? It will depend on the policy that you signed. You need to read all the contract. You need to read the cancellation refund clause. The exclusive agent that I recommend has full refund clauses, regardless of the conditions. Okay, but some companies will say, I'm not going to refund you, or I'm going to refund you only partially, or I'm going to refund you only if the reason of denial was the health insurance policy. But if you were denied because of another reason, I'm not going to refund you. So you need to read all that, to discuss this with your broker, with your exclusive agent. Make sure to read everything, because what you sign, you're signing it. It's a contract. What are the top companies in Spain? Top one is Adeslas, for sure, and by far. Then you have Asisa, DKV, ASA, Salus, Casas, Sanitas, AXA, Mafre. All those are good companies, all of them. There's not much difference. They will have differences depending on the area, okay, where you live. If you move to Malaga, Valencia, Basque Country, some companies are not present in those areas. Some companies have less doctors or less hospitals, but also this changes almost by the year. So maybe you do an incredible investigation, you move, you move to Malaga, you have an incredible coverage. The following year, this company stops having agreements with certain hospitals, etc. So it's a very dynamic thing. So that is the situation, and this is, you can see here the size of the companies. By far, Adeslas is the biggest one. I think if you add Asisa and Sanitas, which are the third and the second one, you get the size of Adeslas. And then you also have DKV. As I said, all those companies are good. There's not much difference, in my humble opinion, unless you have some specific things and specific requirements that you want to make sure you're going to be covered with. You need to, of course, investigate all that, right? This is a little thing that happened a few weeks ago. If you're applying at the Washington, D.C., they use BLS. And on the BLS website, they were trying to sell you a travel health insurance in order to apply for the NLV. And it was quite confusing, because if you go to the requirements, and I'm sorry for such a noisy slide, but there you have the requirements, and they say clearly, travel insurance will not be accepted. No travel insurances will be accepted. So therefore, that pop-up that came at Washington, D.C. was extremely misleading. A lot of people made a mistake to purchase that travel health insurance. Make sure not to apply with the travel health insurance. Apply with that NLV-compliant health insurance. Okay? And supposedly this pop-up was meant to be for the Schengen visa, and mistakenly was appearing also for non-lucrative visa applicants as well. As I mentioned, I recommend Carlos Blanco, expert immigration lawyer as well. He knows the ins and outs of the non-lucrative visa. He will recommend you, the perfect timings for hiring the health insurance. And he has one thing that sets him apart. He can delay the start date of your health insurance without any problems, which is something that most companies can't. They can only start the health insurance only 1 month in advance, sometimes 2, paying an extra. In this case, Carlos will be able to extend it without problems. So yeah, those two things, I think he's the best out there, and that's why I have been recommending Carlos for the last 3 years. And it's absolutely free to contact him and get a quote from him, and I'm sure he will do the best to give you the best of services. There's a lot of great comments and great reviews about him from people who work with him. As I said, the fact that he's an immigration lawyer and he can extend the starting dates, and he offers I would say, the best policy in terms of price and value, which is Adeslas. I think he's the best out there. So I'm very, very happy to recommend him. You can find him on Spainguru.es, Spainguru.es/health insurance. Now let's move to medical certificate. It is absolutely different document than the health insurance. Okay. It is a 1-page document that has only 3-month validity that needs to be valid when you submit your documentation. Depending on the country where you are and other conditions, you have to do different things with these documents. Okay. First, you need to obtain this document from a doctor. The doctor needs to sign. It cannot be another person that is not a registered doctor. But in the USA, you will print the certificate in an official looking manner with the doctor letterhead and the doctor's signature. Hopefully he can add a stamp with a registration number. Authorities love stamps with wet ink. Okay. Most consulates provide a template because it has to have a specific wording. You cannot change that wording. Doctors cannot add things like "to the best of my knowledge" or etc. No, It needs to be the specific wording. And if you can use the template that comes both in English and in Spanish, as the one there in front of you, make sure that both parts are signed, and then you will avoid having to sworn translate it. Because if it only comes in English, you will have to sworn translate it. Now, if you obtain it from a UK doctor, it will also need to be apostilled. And doctors in the UK need to be registered at the Foreign Ministry or FCDO registered. If they are not, you will not be able to apostille it. So be careful with that. Now, there's a third option, which is using a Spanish doctor, which you can find on Spainguru.es. Spanish doctor's certificate have a few pros and one con sometimes. The two pros is that it is in Spanish, so you don't need to translate it. It doesn't need to be apostilled, so all this is time and money that you save. But some consulates have some, again, crazy interpretations of these requirements that are written anywhere in any law or regulation, that you need to be physically present in the country, in Spain, at the time of issuing the certificate. Not all the consulates require this, but Manchester does, for example. It is not the case of London, not the case of Edinburgh. You don't have to be physically present. Or, for example, Miami also doesn't care where you are when you obtain this certificate, okay? Because, of course, with the Spanish doctor, you can do it fully online with a WhatsApp or Zoom call, okay? And that would be it. Also, if you need a UK doctor and you don't find it, you can find UK doctors' medical certificates on Spainguru.es, fully online as well. You will need to apostille them and so on translated, but these are also accepted certificates if you're applying from the UK. And this is a chart that summarizes what I just said, that you can rewatch if you watch the video when I upload it to YouTube. Now, here someone said, these are some crazy stuff that I want to share with you, so you're not surprised if that happens to you, but I just saw this once in 3 years. Someone in the US, specifically in Chicago, got requested to get an apostilled medical certificate. This is absolutely uncommon and never seen in the US. This person solved it by notarizing the medical certificate, obtaining an apostille for the notarized document, and submitting this, and then it was okay. But it should not happen to you. But you should know that it exists, those kind of things. Sometimes somebody gets crazy at the consulate and asks, asking things. Of course, if you have a lawyer, they will fight this, okay, and you will not need to submit it. But sometimes people don't want to add any friction to their process, and they just comply with the crazy requirements. Now let's talk about the clean criminal background check. This is usually the document that takes the longest to obtain. It must be squeaky clean during the last years. In the UK, it's called the ACRO. You will have to apostille it and so on translate it. It has usually a 6-month validity. It has to be valid when you submit the papers. In the US, it's the FBI background check that requires a federal apostille, okay, no state apostille, federal apostille, and sworn translation. That has usually a 6-month validity as well. Check always with your consulate. Am I still eligible with records on my background check? So it depends how serious those records are. If it's a misdemeanor, something small like smoking pot years ago or driving under the influence years ago, stuff like that, usually there's no problem. If you have something serious like having served conviction time, violent crimes, etc., usually it's a denial. You will have to go through an expungement process and delete those records. Otherwise, you will usually not get the Spanish visas with those records, okay? If you have any of those, make sure to work with a lawyer because they know what to do in order to, so that the consulate disregards certain records, okay? Am I still eligible with a no live trace? Yes, you are, but the consulates are asking for an extra document from the ACRO office explaining what type of record you have under the no live trace. Can I expedite the background check federal apostille? Not officially, but Spainguru has partnered with Monument Visa, and you can get it in as short as 10 business days, where it usually takes between 4 to 6 weeks to get the federal apostille. So go on Spainguru.es if you need to move fast. Can I notarize the background check and use state apostille instead? No, always federal apostille. Where can I have my fingerprints taken? At a USPS post office, at a channeler's private channeler office, or you can also stamp with wet ink into certain forms that you mail via physical email to the FBI. What if my fingerprints are illegible? Send me an email to hello@spainguru.es. I will send you some solutions. And these are some tips from the Spainguru's community. People in the UK saying that the ACRO is taking about 5 to 6 weeks. This hasn't changed in the last weeks. And in Canada, they're moving very fast. And now the apostille is taking only a few days, whereas it was taking a few months last year to obtain. So now our Canadian friends can get their apostille background check pretty quickly. So good news for them. Now, proof of not working. This is also a question that many people ask. And not everyone is retired at the time of application. Usually the non-lucrative visa is called the retirement visa, but not everyone is retired when they apply. They just want to take a sabbatical year, or they want just to make money until the very end, or they have doubts of being approved, and they don't want to quit their jobs unless they get the visa. This is also a situation. But for most people who are retiring, proof of receiving a pension is the best you can show. If you're still working, many consulates in the UK, the 3 consulates will be quite adamant by asking you the P45 form. In the US, you can provide a resignation letter, termination letter from employer, both translated and notarized. If you're freelancers in the US, a notarized affidavit promising not to work. In the UK, a letter from HMRC, an accountant stating having ceased tradings and deregistered for self-employment. I have templates for all this on Spainguru.es. But let's continue talking. What if, should I quit before I get the visa? We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But first, is renting out a property considered a job? Depends. 1-2 properties renting on a long-term basis is not considered a job. But if you have 60 apartments and you rent them on a vacational basis, like Airbnb, it could be considered a business. So anything in between, if you have the doubt that it could be considered a business, maybe you should appoint a property manager. Okay, so it is quite clear that you are not part of the operations of that business, okay, and you're just receiving the benefits as passive income. Is investing in stocks considered active income? No. Can I volunteer while on a non-lucrative visa? Yes, but never get paid for it. Never accept money. Don't accept money for volunteering. Don't accept money for lunches. Don't accept money for transportation. But you can perfectly volunteer, and also I highly recommend doing so because it will help you and others, and it will help you so much once you move to Spain to feel at home, build your community network if you volunteer while helping others. So this is what people say about still working at the time of application in the UK. A P45 is one way, but so is a letter from your employer stating that you have resigned and will leave on a certain date. But I'm telling you, they're quite strict lately. Someone said, looks like a bit of a potluck if they accept a letter from HR departments in place of a P45 if working up to the last minute. Many times they force you to get a P45. And maybe it's just like they tell you they say like, we're just missing a P45 for the visa, to grant the visa. So that's when you go and get the P45. This is what's usually happening in the UK. And on the right, there's someone still asking, like, I'm still working at the time of application. Can I convince them not to show the P45? There's no clear answer. Most people were forced to provide the P45 in the UK. But in the US, they are more open into this. And many consulates have written under the requirements what you can provide if you're still working, what kind of promise. But lately, in the last week, they started to be a bit more strict also in the USA about quitting before your NLV submission. This is something that seems to be starting to change. It could be the one specific case, something isolated, but it seems this could be from every consulate. Like this person, last week said in Houston, 5 of June, yes, last week, 10 days ago, I'm posting this case, somebody's similar situation in Houston. My documents were not accepted. Reason was I presented a letter from my employer stating my retirement date on August 29th. The BLS representative explained that the letter was unacceptable because the intended retirement date is in the future, and I can only apply after my retirement date. Okay, so this happened in Houston, and this happened 10 days ago. Something to have in mind. Coming back to the question, can I work under a non-lucrative visa? Remotely later on, or what happens if I tell them that I plan to work after living a few years without working in Spain? If you do that, you will be denied, even if you should be able to do it. Recently, someone wrote me and asked me for my opinion about their letter of intent, and they were mentioning that they plan to spend a few years in Spain, but with a non-lucrative visa, but after that, they wanted to modify their permit to be able to work in Spain. Of course, you can do it. But they mentioned it to the consulate and they were denied. So this is the case here on this slide, the case of a Venezuelan national who showed activity on LinkedIn at the time of application. The consulate in Buenos Aires denied the visa, the non-lucrative visa to this person. This person went to court in Madrid and lost. The court said that the consulate was right. This person was showing activity in LinkedIn. I don't know what kind of activity. But this is how paranoid the consulates can be in terms of you not being able to show enough proof that you are not working and you will not work once your visa is granted. Now let's talk about marriage, birth certificates, non-married couples. Married couples need a valid and updated marriage certificate, usually 6-month validity. Children will need birth certificates, and non-married couples normally, depending on the consulate, they can be strict consulates. Non-married couples can also apply, but they need to prove the relationship. The biggest and best, the best proof is showing that you are legal partners, that you're legally a couple in your countries, okay? But then you will start to make a case if you don't have that document, like you have children together, that you have joint accounts, joint written contracts, property deeds, photos traveling together, these kind of things. But in the end, you will have a weaker case than if you prove that you are legal partners in your country, okay? Because the legal partnership exists in Spain, so they will accept that you are legal partnership in your country as valid, let's say. But if you don't have that, you will have to make a case, and many consulates tend to be quite strict about accepting non-married couples that don't make a strong case. And usually the solution is just applying as two main applicants, unfortunately, with higher financial requirements. These certificates need to be apostilled in the country that issued them and sworn translated into Spanish if they haven't been issued in Spanish. What about adult children and ascendants? This changed on May 20th. If you have adult children that you want to bring as dependents on your non-lucrative visa, you may no longer do so. They have to be younger than 18 years old. Now they have to apply as main applicants for the non-lucrative visa. Now, we mentioned sworn translations, but what are sworn translators exactly? Sworn translators are accredited by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and no one else can appoint sworn translators. They pass a very difficult exam to become certified. Each sworn translator has a unique registration number. Their translations are accepted by all Spanish institutions, including consulates and, of course, BLS offices. Translations are done remotely and signed with a legally valid e-signature, so no physical mail is needed. You scan your original documents, you ask for a quote, you ask for a day in which you want to have your translation done, and then they proceed to translate, and they will send you a digital version with their signatures and with their stamps that you can print and submit to your consulate. Can I use any translator from the American Translator Association? No. They need to be sworn translators appointed by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I mentioned this because Miami and Los Angeles mentioned the ATA Association in their web pages, and it is quite misleading. Can a sworn translator work with several language pairs? No, they only work with one pair, English, Spanish, Spanish, English, or German, Spanish, Spanish, German, etc. How much do a sworn translator cost? Usually for the usual documents of the non-lucrative visa, about 40 euros per page. And more or less, depending on complexity, that will be the price, and also how fast you want the delivery. You can find recommended sworn translators on Spainguru.es, sworn translators for any language pair on Spainguru.es. What comes first, the apostille and then the sworn translation? So most of the people won't sworn translate the apostille. Some will do. This is what usually people do. They get their original document, they scan it, they send it to a sworn translation for translation. At the same time, they take the original document and they send it to obtain the apostille. They receive their sworn translation, they receive their original document and the apostille, and that's what they will submit. But there is a risk in not sworn translating the apostille as well. Okay, many lawyers also sworn translate the apostilles. Okay, this can create friction. The best you can do is to ask your consulate whether they will accept your apostille or not without being sworn translated. I have actually a recording about the NLV Q&A question with Bob Kane. He asked, I think he had a marriage certificate from Germany in 4 languages, and he asked the Miami consulate, and they said that they were going to accept it without sworn translating the apostille. So that's the best you can do if you can. But in order to be on the safe side, sworn translating everything is the best you can do. But of course, it's costly. I asked about the bank statements sworn translation. This is also a big question. Should I sworn translate my bank statements? Some of them, they have 100 pages. That would be like 4,000 euros in sworn translations. Of course, it's something that not everyone does. But if you work, for example, with Ainhoa Manero of Stern Abogados, she has a sworn translator that works in-house, and she will sworn translate every single thing. Okay? But of course, this is like a fixed price in the package that she offers you. Yeah. Now, 77% of people haven't sworn translated their bank statements, and I assume that the bank statements were in English, because if the banks are in other languages, okay, for example, Japanese, Korean, etc., You will have to Swan translate. Now, 17% decided to only Swan translate their summary pages, 3% Swan translate everything, and those are mainly the three categories. If you want to know more about the frequently asked questions of the non-lucrative visa by lawyers, not only by Ainhoa, but also Sofia Mejail from CABR Relocation Solutions, you can go on Spainguru YouTube channel and you can watch those videos for absolutely free. Just takes a few minutes and you're going to get much more knowledge about this visa. Remember that there's a Q&A session at the end. You can ask your questions anytime by adding a question mark at the end on the chat box on the bottom right corner of your screen. And if you had to leave early this webinar, I will thank you so much for attending. Please leave a review on Trustpilot if you think the information that I'm sharing today with you is valuable. Thank you so much. And let's continue with the presentation and the webinar. Now let's move to during the application. Remember, all family members must apply. They all need to fill their their forms and pay their fees. Consider that in most cases, it's an in-person application. Sometimes you have to pick up your passport at the consulates physically and in person as well, and all applicants need to be present. But depending on the consulate, they have different rules, so always check them out. Some consulates only deal by mail, for example, Panama Consulate. Some consulates use a combination or give you the option. This was the case of Houston. They was only by mail. Now they use BLS, so it's in person. So it depends. You make sure to understand how the communication is happening. The non-lucrative visa grants a 90-day window to arrive to Spain. As we said, it's a visa. Stick to your passport. It will come with your NIE number on it, okay, that they give you automatically. And after that 90-day window, validity window, that visa is expired, okay? So you have to obtain the residency once you are in Spain. Common mistakes to avoid: not checking the specific consulate requirements. Always read the requirements many times and go back every couple of weeks and read the requirements because they may change. They may add things. Check the consulate's requirements in English, in Spanish. Check BLS requirements. And sometimes consulates have internally requirements as well. Okay, that when someone shares those on Spainguru's community, I post them on Spainguru's dedicated page for each consulate, because people see when they go to the BLS office or the consulate, they see that there are printed pages with slightly different requirements than the one that they saw on the website. Okay, and of course they need to provide everything that is on those pages. So be careful with those. Houston had one, New York had one. Common mistake: supplying wrong documents, expired documents outside of their validity period, wrong chronology, starting with easy stuff at the beginning and leaving the hard stuff at the end, wrong health insurance, co-payments, reimbursement clauses, bad certificate of coverage wording, something like that. Could be say that you plan to work or not enough proof to work, so not convincing them enough that you will not work. Showing activity in LinkedIn, these kind of things, you have to be extremely careful. Or saying that, oh, I want to apply for the non-lucrative visa and live without working in Spain for 2 years, and then I want to go back to work because I'm still young. If you say that, you are denied, even if you are in your total right to say it. Time. How much in advance should I start preparing before moving to Spain? Usually, the minimum. Start 6 months before your intended date to move to Spain. This is for USA and Canada. Maybe faster in the UK, 4 to 5 months. Most consulates retain passports, BLS offices, during processing. US applicants can get a second passport quite easily if you need it for traveling. BLS may allow UK applicants to keep theirs sometimes, but it's rare. You need to really make a case. And it's very hard to obtain a second passport in the UK because you have to fulfill very strict conditions, and applying for a visa is not one of them. And some of them will give you prepaid envelopes, so you receive your passports in your home or in the address that you appointed, but many of them will require an in-person visit, so you will have to go and travel to your consulate again to pick up your passport. Sometimes that's happened. How long does the process take? Documents preparation about 2 to 3 months. Attending the appointment usually on the 3rd month. These are all ballpark figures. You will wait for approval, processing time, usually 2 months approximately. It could be 10 days, it could be 15 days, it could be 90 days, which is the official deadline to provide with an answer. But it could also go beyond 90 days. It happens. Then if they need extra documentation, they will only give you 10 days period to provide that extra documentation. So prepare for that in case you're not sure about something that you submitted. You can choose a visa start date in the future. So you submit your papers, and in the form you write, when do you want the visa to start? You write it. And you can ask a date, which is, I think this is not official, but up to 90 days from the submission date, you can ask the visa to start anytime during that period. okay? And if the consulate grants you the visa before, maybe they grant you that wish. Officially, you will have 30 days to obtain your tarjeta de identidad extranjero, or TIE card, which is the residency card, once you are in Spain, which will be valid for 1 year. Someone said that you can ask for the visa to be valid for up to 3 months in advance. However, the difficulty I found was finding a health insurance company who will work that far out, as most only do 2, and now most only do 1 month in advance. Solution: you can use Spainguru's recommended exclusive agent that can extend the starting date in the future without problems. And here we go to some visual slides so you understand the timings better, hopefully. Imagine that you submit your paperwork on date A. Every segment on that line is a month. So you can choose the start date of your visa sometime in the next 3 months. Let's say that you choose it on the date B, letter B, okay? And the consulate grants you the visa before the date B, and they decide to say, okay, fine, let's start your visa when you chose. So they started on letter B. So you have 90 days in red to enter Spain. Yes. So you decide just to do it just before that validity period ends on letter C. You enter Spain during the visa validity period, and once you enter, you have 30 days to get your residency card, or TIE. The renewal of your residency will be after 1 year of your TIE card start, which should be the same day that you enter Spain. Okay, should be, but sometimes it's not because of the police officer, or if you enter as a tourist before their visa validity date. Remember that you can renew your non-lucrative residence 60 days before the card expiration and up to 90 days after it has expired, although everyone recommends to do it 60 days before for several reasons. And here's another visual slide. This is, of course, for illustration purposes only, okay? Some people have done things before and after, but this is more or less how the process should look. Also, many consulates now have a bottleneck with their appointments, so people start getting the appointments or trying to obtain the appointments even earlier than stated on this slide. But first, you will need to find your consulate. Second, check your official requirements. Third, start with the longest documents. For example, usually the police background check. Then your medical certificates, okay? If you're married, if you go with children, you need to obtain your birth certificates, your marriage certificates, okay? Now, coming back to the medical certificates, it has 3 months validity. The police checks, usually 6 month validity. The marriage and birth certificates, usually 6 month validity. Then you will need to apostille everything and swan translate everything. Then, closer to your appointment, you will have to sort out your private health insurance or S1 form if you are a pensionist. Book your appointment, attend the appointment when applicable, submit your paperwork, wait for the processing, then you will collect your visa, they will send it to you. Then you will fly to Spain during the visa validity period. Once you move to Spain, you obtain an empadronamiento or certificado de empadronamiento, which is registering your address where you live in the city hall of the city where you live, okay? And that's a proof of address that you will present in 90% of cases when you visit the police station or foreign office to obtain your residency card. Yet another slide. So yeah, you understand the timings better. Imagine that you want to move sometime during September. You have to start in January almost, okay, in my opinion. First, the police check. You get it in February. It will be valid for 6 months. You will apostille, so translate it. Then on the 3rd month, and in April, you get your financial documents from your bank, etc. Medical certificate. You will start trying to get an appointment. Once you get those documents, you will swan translate and obtain apostilles as well. You will attend your appointment. You will wait for the processing period. And then your health insurance will start covering you and you will travel to Spain. This is how it looks, more or less. Long story short, and again, this is for illustrative purposes only. Depending on your situation, this could vary a lot. Let's go back to taxes. And many people decide to sell their houses before moving to Spain, and there's ways to avoid a tax, capital gains tax in Spain. The best way you can do it is to become a Spanish tax resident on a different year from when you sell your home. There are 2 situations. For example, you sell your house in 2024, and then you move to Spain in 2025. You can only become a Spanish tax resident in Spain in 2025. If you sold your home in 2024, it's different tax years. This is the first case in the top row. In the lower row, if that you have to sell the house during the same year in which you move to Spain. Make sure to spend in Spain less than 182 days physically in Spain, because you know that you become a Spanish tax resident during that year, retroactively to anything that happened from January 1st. Okay, so if you move after the 2nd of July, you're going to be fine. Make sure not to have been in Spain earlier in the year as a tourist doing a scouting trip or anything, because those days will count. If you want to know more about taxes in general, about Spanish taxes as a UK national, as an American national, and in general as a foreigner moving to Spain, you have so many videos and blog posts on Spainguru's YouTube channel and Spainguru's blog that will make you much more knowledgeable. And of course, you have a Spanish taxes webinar that you can join every 15 days and watch the recordings as well. You can find them on Spainguru's YouTube channel. Now let's talk about after the approval. What happens? You will arrive to Spain either from outside Schengen or from inside Schengen. If you arrive from outside of Schengen, you will get a stamp from the Spanish authorities on your visa. Try always to fly to Spain within the visa validity period. Otherwise, you may face some problems later on when you want to get your residency card. If you travel to Spain from inside Schengen, for example, you fly from New York to Frankfurt and then from Frankfurt to Spain, you will only get the stamp from the German authorities, not from the Spanish one. You need the Spanish authority stamp. So for that, you need to get a declaración de entrada, which is a one-page document that you get from a police station. Usually airports have this police station, or when you cross the border from France or from Portugal, you have police station in the border who are used to issue this certificate that proves that you enter Spain by Spanish authorities. Okay, and you will need to present that when you want to obtain your TIE card. Now, some recommendations when you enter Spain: get a Spanish SIM card to receive SMS especially from the processes that you are doing. Open a non-resident bank account because you will need to pay your rent, utilities, and many more things, and it takes time to get your residency card. Obtain an empadronamiento. As I said, 90% of police stations will require an empadronamiento. And officially, you will need to already, once you enter Spain, try to get an appointment with the police station or foreign office, whichever is closer, at least within the same region, same province, okay, in order to get your tarjeta de identidad extranjera, okay? Remember to make sure to find out if that specific police station where you got your appointment require an empadronamiento, or you can present maybe a rental contract or something else, because getting an appointments is difficult, and also getting empadronamientos is difficult sometimes. But a lawyer appoints at the Spainguru community that when you go for obtaining your TIE appointment, in fact, it is not an official requirement to get an empadronamiento, to submit an empadronamiento, okay? You need to show proof of address. The best proof of address is an empadronamiento, but not the only one. He has successfully obtained TIE cards showing Airbnb receipts or rental contracts, etc. And the big police stations know this. Maybe the small ones know, and they tend to ask you for empadronamiento. If you don't have it, it can be a problem, okay? So always, but have in mind that it is not an official requirement to show an empadronamiento. But in 90% of cases, unfortunately, they will ask you to have one. Also, you will find when you arrive to Spain that appointments for the TIE card are also very hard. Now in Valencia, it's crazy. There are no appointments. People are getting a bit desperate, but it can take many months to get an empadronamiento. To get an appointment for your TIE card. But don't desperate, because this is something that everyone's going through, and nothing will happen to you. It will not deport you or anything. This is something that all the authorities know, that there are no appointments, unfortunately, available, and this has been happening forever. Renewal process, how I want to renew your non-lucrative visa. As we said, after 1 year, you have to renew your non-lucrative residence, okay? You can do it starting 60 days before the expiration of your TIE card and up to 90 days after the expiration. All that time is okay for you to renew. There are financial requirements for renewal. Usually, in most provinces, double the amount of savings. If you're receiving passive income, you have to calculate it. We're going to look at that. And the funds need to be available in the account when they're renewing. So most provinces are okay with showing funds in an account outside of Spain. But some provinces, they ask you to have a Spanish bank account with some activity, at least. This is the case of Valencia now. Some people are getting asked for this. This is the case of Canary Islands as well. And then after you renewed the first year, you will get a 2-year residence, and then you will renew again for 2 more years, total 5. And after that, you can go for the long-term residence if you can. There are some requirements. Now, renewal process update. We have a new regulation from May 20th, and they have stated on this regulation that you need to stay a minimum amount of days of 183 days in Spain in order to be able to renew your non-lucrative residence. Many people say that this aligns with the Spanish tax residency rules, but in fact, the tax year and the immigration year are different things. They can overlap most of the time, but they're different. The immigration year, if you arrive to Spain on the 1st of June, it's a natural year until the 1st of June of the following year. But the tax year, as we said, is a calendar year that runs from January 1st to December 31st. So they can coincide or not, your minimum stays. Now, there is legal ambiguity about this new requirement of minimum 183 days for the renewal. And there is a Supreme Court saying that the regulation cannot have a minimum stay requirement. If this minimum stay requirement has to exist, it should be the main organic law that needs to have it. But the government has to go through many more difficulties and more steps in order to change the law. So what they do is to try to change the regulation of the law. But the Supreme Court says that in the regulation of the law, it cannot be this requirement. So I have interviewed Ainhoa Manero again about this, and she said that this minimum stay of 183 days per natural year, the immigration year, not tax year, okay, is not enforceable. The same way that it was not enforceable in the previous regulation that had a minimum of 180 days. Now the minimum stay of 183 days is not enforceable, and it is not going to happen, according to Ainhoa Manero. So if you plan to have the non-lucrative visa and stay less than 183 days in Spain, make sure to have this in mind and potentially go with professional help just to make sure that you can plan accordingly, according to your plans, to your personal plans. So it is not, a lot of people are taking this for granted, that you have to stay minimum 183 days and becoming a tax resident in Spain, which is not true. It is absolutely not true. This is what I'm saying, okay? So yes, of course, I'm not a legal advisor. I'm not a lawyer. I have videos on YouTube where I interview lawyers talking about this, and this is what they say. You're welcome to watch those videos and plan your plans accordingly. Now, let's talk about a case study for the renewal process. As we said, they will ask you double the amount for the renewal. So if you're a couple, it's 36,000 times 2, that's 72,000. Now, imagine that the main applicant has a 15,000 euros pension per year. That means that in 2 years, this person will get 30,000 euros. So that counts as 30,000 euros in 2 years. So they need to provide an extra 42,000 euros. That can be savings. That can be other types of passive income. Could be interest, could be other things. Even rental income could count, but make sure to understand whether your region is accepting rental income, because many regions and consulates, as I stated before, are considering this type of income as a bit unsafe. Documentation requirements for the renewal: ongoing private medical insurance coverage or public healthcare system coverage. Don't allow gaps. Updated passport copies for both individuals, and avoid having police records. Apparently, people drive under the influence once they are in non-lucrative visa residence. They get a record in Spain, and they cannot renew their residency. So be a good person when you are under this visa and any other visa in Spain. Local town registration. Then for the renewal, most of the provinces will ask you for an empadronamiento. Although someone in Granada said that they didn't need it to provide it. But in most cases, you will need for the renewal. That's for sure. It's an official requirement. Time you need to spend in Spain to maintain your residence, as we said. If you're a holder of a non-lucrative visa, if you want to renew it, there's now a new requirement of 183 days plus not per calendar year, per immigration year. There's a typo here. I will have to. But as we said, it's legal ambiguity. There's a Supreme Court saying that you cannot enforce this, so you shouldn't be forced to do it. If you want to apply for the long-term residence after living 5 years in Spain, remember, you cannot be outside of Spain more than 10 months in the previous 5 years before to obtain the long-term residence. Those 10 months don't have to be consecutive, but cannot be more than 6 months at once, okay? And if you don't comply with these minimum stay requirements for the long-term residence, sometimes some regions allow you to renew your non-lucrative residence for a third time, called extraordinary renewal, okay? But for example, Galicia doesn't allow it. And if you want to go for the Spanish passport, if you're a holder of temporary residency, like non-lucrative visa, you cannot be outside of Spain more than 3 months per year. For example, you have dual citizenship, you're a holder of non-lucrative residence, you are Colombian passport holder. After 2 years, you can apply for the Spanish passport, but you shouldn't be outside of Spain more than 90 days per year before applying. And if you're a holder of long-term residence, you cannot be outside of the EU for more than 1 year consecutively, or no more than 30 months in 5 years. And coming back to the Supreme Court ruling that in the previous regulation, they deleted, if you see there the red arrow, they deleted the previous stay requirement of 180 days. They had to delete it from the regulation because of the Supreme Court. Okay, and this is This was the previous requirement. You have to be in Spain at least 180 days. Okay. And now it is in letter F, okay, of Article 64. And still, they just took effect, but according to I know many of them abogados, will not be able to enforce it because of the Supreme Court ruling. Now let's talk about potential pathways to transition to work permit after 1 year. Don't mention this at the consulate, okay? It is totally legal. It is totally legal, but the consulates are insane sometimes, I have to say, with all my due respect for them and their work. But yeah, the most common pathways to come back to work, and these are the easiest pathways, not the only ones, but after 1 year of legal residency in Spain under non-lucrative residence, experts say that you have to, the best way is you renew your residency for the year 2 and 3. And once you have the renewal, you can apply for a modification of your non-lucrative residence for when you start your own business, trabajo por cuenta propia, or if you receive an offer from a company, trabajo por cuenta ajena. Or if you've been working under the non-lucrative residency on remotely for a non-Spanish company for the previous 3 months, you can effectively change for the non-lucrative visa or residence to the digital nomad visa or teleworkers visa or residence, okay? Which, of course, many people are doing because they are working undercover under the non-lucrative residence. Remotely, of course, always, never for a Spanish company. As we mentioned before, if you're a passport holder of any of those countries in red, Ibero-American countries, Philippines, Guinea Equatorial, Portugal, Andorra, Brazil, you can apply for the Spanish passport after only 1 year of legal residence, after only 2 years of legal residency in Spain, as long as you haven't been outside of Spain for more than 90 days per year. Okay, so if you're a dual citizen, for example, American, Puerto Rican, you can benefit from this fast track. Okay, of course, you need to be able to prove that you're a citizen of Puerto Rico or Mexico. Okay, and you have to be origin citizen of those countries. Okay, you cannot, for example, have no ties to Mexico. You travel to Mexico, you live there for a certain time, they give you citizenship, and you get naturalized Mexican with no origin ties to that country. Then you cannot benefit from the fast track. Okay, I remind you that you can use Spainguru for absolutely free. You can join our newsletter, YouTube channel, watch the videos for free, read the blog posts, join the Facebook groups, specifically the Spanish non-lucrative visa dedicated group. All those for absolutely free, where you can get experience, first-hand experiences and tips from the community. But also you can use my personally vetted partners that I have been recommending for several years: immigration experts, tax advisors, financial planners, non-lucrative visa compliant health insurances, medical certificates from translation and postal services, everything you need for your Spanish non-lucrative visa application. You can find it on spainguru.es. If you want to stay in touch, please send me an email to hello@spainguru.es. I always answer my emails. Join the Facebook group for the Spanish non-lucrative visa. Watch the YouTube channel. Join the newsletter. And remember, the content of this webinar is for information purposes only and is not legal advice. The requirements listed here are not official. Please check your specific consulate's requirements. Now, let's go to the Q&A session. Remember that you can ask any question related to the non-lucrative visa or moving to Spain or taxes, anything that I can answer here regarding to move to Spain. I'm happy to do my best to answer it. If you haven't done so yet, or you have to leave earlier, please go to Trustpilot and leave a review out there. It's the only thing I will ask in return for this free webinar. If you think the information that I shared today is valuable, then it will really make my day, even my week, if you leave a nice review out there. And I will be crossing my fingers for your non-lucrative visa application as well. Now, let's go to the questions here. And first of all, thank you so much for joining today. I know it is very early for many of you, so thank you for being here today. And of course, asking questions. George, do I have to arrive in Spain at the same time on the same flight as my dependent? I've never been asked that. I don't think so. I don't know what could be the consequences of that. Because your dependent will receive a non-lucrative visa in their passport. It doesn't matter when that person arrives. What matters is that everyone arrives within the visa validity window of 90 days. Okay, because if you do it outside, if you do it before as a tourist, it can bring some problems. Like later on, when you go to your TA card appointment, they maybe put you that you enter Spain before, and therefore you need to renew your non-lucrative visa earlier than you expected. Sometimes they will ask you to go out of the Schengen area and come back in during the visa validity period. This has happened. It's not common, but it has happened. So that's what I would pay attention. As far as I understand, like you have your own passport with your visa, your dependent have their own passport with their visas, and as long as they enter and they get the Spanish authority stamp, remember, if you enter from within Schengen, you get your declaración de entrada, you need it. But as long as you are in the visa validity window, I don't think it does matter that you enter with the same airplane. I never heard that. Okay, I'm not a legal advisor. I'm not a lawyer. Check with the community. Check with a professional. But that would be my answer. That's a great question, actually. So let's go with the next one. George, what do you mean by updated certificate? 6 months for marriage. I mean that you need to get a new one. You married in 1975. You have your marriage certificate from 1975. That's expired. Marriage certificates have a validity window of usually 6 months, unless stated otherwise. Therefore, you need to get a new original copy of the birth certificates or marriage certificate in this case, from where you got married. If you got married in the UK, fine, in the UK. If you got married in the US, in the US. If you got married in Cyprus, that happens a lot, in Trinidad and Tobago, in South Africa, you need to get the new original copy of the marriage certificate from the place where you got married. And you will have to get an apostille from the authorities that issue it and a sworn translation to Spanish, okay? If it's not in Spanish. Let's say that you married in Colombia. You will need to get a new marriage certificate. You will need to apostille it, but you will not need to sworn translate it because in Colombia they speak Spanish. The certificate is in Spanish, and you don't need to sworn translate it to Spanish because it's already in Spanish. George, can you recommend a company or agency to help us with application from Abu Dhabi? Of course, I can recommend you. Let's see, screen sharing. If I can screen share something here. Spainguru. We go to cancel. Sorry, you can. Let me see. How can I share my screen? It's not so easy. Sorry, I should know it. All right, Spainguru webinars, Spainguru. All right, here. I hope you can see my screen. This is Spainguru.es. Here you have this button, Immigration and Tax Experts, or if you come here to the menu, you can see Spanish Immigration Experts. Anyways, we push here, this button. Here you can see Spanish Immigration Experts. All these are experienced NLD immigration experts. You have here tax experts, sworn translators, health insurance, apostilles in the US and UK, and so many more services. But if you go to immigration experts, you will have here Externa Abogados, CBR Lexidi. Okay, these are the lawyers. Okay, and if you go to Externa, for example, here you can get a consultation. Okay, or you can write an email with your case. Okay, and here you can also watch all the interviews that I did to Ainhoa, for example. And my recommendation is you shop around. You contact all the lawyers and see which one offers you the best according to your budget. And but make sure that you can be sure that you are in good hands. Any of the recommendations that I have are experienced in non-lucrative visa. Now let's go with the next question. I cannot get onto the BLS London to book an appointment. It says I'm outside the area, which I'm not. Any suggestions? I don't know. I don't really know, Karen. What the suggestion that I have is that you ask. I don't know if you join the Spanish non-lucrative visa group on Facebook, but there's more than 20,000 members. It's very active. A lot of people are applying now at London and many other consulates, and many ask this type of questions that they change all the time. Okay, because sometimes the appointments get there's a big bottleneck, and a lot of people are very concerned about this in a specific consulate, but then they get all the appointments, and then there's other people in other consulates. So basically, join the community and ask other people if they have the same problem. And if they have any solutions, okay? And if you wanna join the Facebook group, I don't know if you see my screen, but you can go to resources, Facebook groups. Yes, you can see here all my Facebook groups, and the non-lucrative visa group is right here, okay? Spanish NLD. 21,000 members. Now, Felix, what happens if I am retired and my spouse is still of working age? Should we apply for different visas? Dependents on non-lucrative visa don't have work rights. So if that is the situation, you have to, in my opinion, I'm not a lawyer, this is not legal advice, but you have to be able to apply for this visa if both of you are able to show that you're not working, okay? As I said, there are gray areas once you get your residencies, etc., etc. I'm not recommending you to do anything, but in my opinion, you should engage with an immigration professional. I showed before how to find my recommended ones. They don't have to be Spainguru, so you can hire any immigration lawyer, but maybe a consultation with one of them, because it really changes according to your circumstances, whether your wife, there's so many variations really that can affect to the answer of that question, okay? And it's also interesting always to engage with a professional, because you talk not only about the non-lucrative visa specifically, but you will tell them what's your goal on the mid and long term, so that you develop a strategy to move to Spain that is aligned with your long-term goals, and also potentially aligned with your taxes. Because if you are working, if your wife is working there, etc., like, there are tax implications that you need to also pay attention. So I am worried that if I answer you this question, let's say I give you, we're starting with the solution before we have really spoken about the full problem, okay? You need to see it in a holistical perspective and in a strategical way. What is the best way you can move to Spain if you are in this situation? In my humble opinion, which is not legal opinion. George, does the Abu Dhabi consulate use BLS? That's a great question. I don't know. Should we check that? Let's see. Let's check that. Screen sharing here. Non-lucrative visa, Abu Dhabi. That's how you write Abu Dhabi. UAE BLS. The first result on Google. Non-lucrative visa, BLS, and this is UAE. So read this and maybe make sure that it is correct. It looks like definitely they're using BLS for this. Okay, visa type. We put here self-employment, working resident, non-lucrative residence visa. Yes, the overview, the visa fees, document required. You have everything here. Okay, UAE.blsspainvisa.com, national non-lucrative visa. Let's go with the next one. Maritza, good morning and thank you for your time. You're welcome. I receive a government state pension in New York. Will this be taxed in Spain or not? Well, I'm not a tax advisor. This is not tax advice. But according to the Spain USA double taxation agreement, state pensions, as I understand, government pensions from the US or public pensions in the UK are not taxable in Spain. Okay. Of course, you need to make sure that your pension is considered to fall into this category by Spanish tax authorities. Okay. And for that, I always recommend at least consulting at least 1 hour with immigration lawyers and with tax lawyers. As I said before, you need to think on a long-term perspective and develop a strategy that aligns correctly to your needs, because there's so many variations depending on your specific situation. I think I made it to the end of the questions. Thank you so much for connecting today. I really appreciate that you made it and you participated and you asked questions. I know it's very early for many of you, so thank you so much for attending today. If you think the information that I shared with you today is valuable, please leave a review on Trustpilot. If you happen to be watching this on YouTube, give it a like. And remember, I'm recording this. I'm going to send you the recording later on, and you can rewatch it again. And always you can reach out to me at hello@spainguru.es. I always answer my emails. Most of the times I will give you straight answers. Some other times I will not know the answer, and I will send you to the right resources or to content or videos that can at least point you in the right direction. And I highly recommend you to join my webinars, my other webinars. Soon I will have a digital nomad visa webinar coming out. I have a moving to Spain webinar, which is a more general webinar. I have about 5 webinars and 1 external webinar that you can join. They're all free. Okay, so you go to spainguru.es/Spainguru webinars, and you can see here that I have all the different webinars here that you can join for free, and you can receive the recordings as well. And I also have a partner who has a Portugal Golden Visa. You probably know the Golden Visa is no longer available in Spain, but it's still available in Portugal. So thank you so much for joining today. I see you around. Thank you, George. Thank you, Felix. And thanks everyone else. Take care. Stay in touch. Bye-bye.